we're off to the races. Okay. So this is MIS418. If you're looking for the calculus class, wrong room. I have the disadvantage of no one putting calculus formulas on the board this time. A lot of fun to mess with people by putting those on the board. You need to join the Slack. Okay, part of your grade will be based on discussions. Now, I want to explain, I'm doing it differently than last time. So if you were my class last semester, doing a little differently because I could not find people's discussions. It was a chaos for me. Okay, it's a great platform for you to collaborate, ask questions, and the feedback I got in the evals was that people loved it because they could ask questions, post things, and then learn more from their fellow students that maybe they missed something. So what you can do is you will post there and you will respond to others, okay, for the Slack. But you also need to screenshot it and attach it to the right Dropbox in Cougar Courses. Okay, so I'll start off by telling you that. That's different than last time, okay? Now, you can subscribe to the YouTube. You can watch it on your phone at your leisure. The recording will be available immediately after class. It won't be labeled, though, usually until I get home and the next morning probably label it. But you can look at this. You can see this. Oh, you don't see it on your side. It's going to be really weird for those actually watching the screen. Okay. You'll see an icon with this on it. The actual label of the video will get changed usually in the morning because this class is so late. Okay, so it'll usually be changed to say this the next morning. Okay, that's also when I'll enable the closed captioning. Okay, and then it usually takes YouTube a little bit of time to set that up. So let me start with talking a little bit about the class structure and whatnot. Okay. So good news is we only meet once a week. Okay. So we're going to talk about the course, the policies, and all that good stuff. And then we're going to do something a little different for the project. Okay? When I talk about the grading, it'll make a little bit more sense. Unlike the previous classes I've had with the project, groups don't always work out so well. Sometimes they work out well, sometimes they don't. And in the end, people get upset because their score is impacted by their groups. So I've done something completely different. And your score for the project-based things will be 50% based on your performance, 25% based on a scrum group of a small group of people that work together on a specific set of tasks. And then the other 25% will be based on the whole team, the whole company or class doing well on the final projects. If there's 2 deliverables that are graded that way. Okay? What that means is we all need to be a team. Okay? There's no backstabbing. It doesn't benefit any of us. Well, okay, it doesn't matter to me. I don't get graded for the course. You all do. Okay. But what that means is we can all do really well together, or we can all do very poorly together, which is why I won't accept late assignments for the project. Okay, it just would ruin the cadence of the class. I will tell you what I will accept late in case you have any personal issues or professional things to get in the way. We will pick Scrum Masters. I'm going to seek volunteers. Okay, I have a feeling we'll get a lot of volunteers. I'll do a quick interview, and then you can pick based on schedule and who you might want to be in a group with, okay, based on picking the Scrum Masters first. And I'll tell you in a little bit what the Scrum Masters are going to do. And then we probably will have a little bit of time to cover the material for the first week, okay? So this course is really a policy course on security and compliance, okay? If you're thinking it's a hands-on course of doing a lot of security, hacking, and things like that, the answer is no, that's not what this course is about. But I have created some labs for those who want that sort of thing, okay? When I talk about the labs, it'll make a little bit more sense what we're going to do there. Okay. So I expect that everybody's going to read the syllabus carefully. Everything should be answered there or on the website. So one of the biggest complaints I got was the project wasn't well documented and you didn't know what the expectations were up front. Okay. You should know. It's on the website. If I haven't defined it yet, it's because I don't know yet for some of the details. Okay. I want to talk about the makeup policy, the late policy, attendance, grading, and academic integrity. Okay. And so let me pull up the syllabus and we can go through that. Everything is on the website. You don't need Box or anything like that. Everything's linked from the website. You go there, that's where you get all the information. Cougar Courses is where you're going to submit everything. Okay. I don't post anything there except for a link to this website. This website's so much better on mobile. I don't know if any of you have tried it yet. It's so much faster. It actually works on mobile. You don't have to bother logging in. It's just you go there, get what you need, and you're done. Okay. Also, make sure you're on the Slack. All right. So let me pull up the syllabus and we'll talk through that. First of all, the book is this one. I don't care if you get an ebook, a paper book. I don't care if it's all banged up. the main thing is if you pick an edition other than the 6th edition, it's all on you to figure out what you're supposed to read, okay? You're going to have to find someone with the 6th edition and then go cross-reference. I'm not going to do that for you, okay? I don't have the time to do that sort of thing, right? This one, when I picked it, was like, I think I saw it for like $50 online, okay? Maybe less if you rented it, okay? You don't need any codes. I think the bookstore makes you buy the code when you buy it from them. She sent me an email, something to that effect, with these C-Engage books, that they make you buy the code at the... If you buy it online elsewhere, you probably don't need to get the code because usually the code's not included anyways, okay? But she wasn't able to source it without the code for the bookstore, okay? No, I don't use that stuff, yeah. So the only thing you need the book for, really, is to understand the material to do the project, because there's a lot of material here on how to do the project aspects, like writing a policy and stuff's all in this book. The other reason is for the exams. The exams have already been written. Multiple choice, true and false. They're posted online. You'll, just like the other classes I've had, you'll have access to do it online. No time limit, okay? So no need to worry about that. I will actually open the midterm a lot earlier than it's due, so it's going to be due a week from when I was planning to release it. I'm actually going to turn it on as soon as I remember to do it in the next couple of days. You'll have access to the midterm right away, so you can actually start seeing what you need to study, okay? But the final is going to be cumulative. So the cumulative final could be from anything in the book, but at least the midterm, you get a sense of what you need to study for. There's no point trying to cheat. Not that anybody's going to do that, right? Because the exams are randomized, the questions, randomized the answers. So you may not have the identical exam to anybody else in the class. Okay. Let me talk about the syllabus now. All right, so that's linked on the web page. Oh, no. There we go. All right, so well, that's not the syllabus. That's the PowerPoint. There's the syllabus. Okay. They moved my office. I'm across from Dr. Sun on the floor above us. Okay. Don't know when I'll be able to get in that office. That's a completely different matter, but that's where I'm located now. Okay. Link to the course website and the Cougar courses is here. Prior to spring break, I will be on site a lot more than after spring break. Okay. After I had already made a commitment for April, and then they changed the schedule for the MIS classes. And so starting after spring break, I won't be able to be here on site except during these times, okay? And then obviously during our class. Okay. Now on Wednesdays when the academic senate meets, you can find the calendar here. I'll also be available for some additional times, okay? You can also schedule appointments if you want to meet with me outside of those times, and we can meet through Zoom, okay? And move on from that. Okay. The Slack workspace, you should be able to get in with your Cougar's email. Okay. If you try to use something else, it will reject you. Okay. That's how we keep the bad people out. Okay. There's the book. And you can search for this ISBN on like isbn.new. And that's a place you can find cheap sources if you haven't already gotten the book, okay? See here, academic integrity, don't cheat, don't lie, don't tell me you took a test or submitted an assignment. There's logs, okay? You're all IT, well, most people are probably MIS majors, okay? There are logs. I can see very easily whether you actually did it or not. And if you lie, that's bad, okay? Let's see here. If you have a DSS form, I ask that you bring it to me in office hours, just so that, as soon as possible, by the way, just because I don't want to have that distributed in class, okay? I'm not going to make exceptions to policies in here. I've already cleared all the policies with the appropriate offices. There's no issues with anything in the syllabus. Late policy and makeup policy. So I don't have to accept them, but I've decided that I will be nice and accept some assignments. Some are not possible to do those, so don't ask, okay? So the ones that you can accept late, here's the penalties, okay? To encourage you to do on time and be fair to those who do submit things on time, okay? So up to 7 days, you can get up to half credit for it. After 7 days, no credit. These ones cannot be submitted late. So the exams, they have a timeline. You have plenty of time to do them, okay? You can take them at your leisure. I wouldn't recommend waiting till the last minute, okay? That's never worked well for folks. The information security policy and procedures, that's the big project we do as a class, okay? As a result, we can't do that one. We can't accept any late assignments for that one because it would put everybody, their grades in jeopardy for the whole class. Okay. The other aspect of there's a big project that we're going to do around security education training. So you're actually going to decide, and we're going to do this starting next week. So please be here next week. Okay. If you can't, you're going to miss out on some critical material. We're going to work on developing security education and training materials. That could be written materials, it could be PowerPoints, it could be videos. Okay. You're going to get to pick what you think would be most effective within your groups and individually contribute to that. And then that will be graded similarly where we have a hybrid model. At the bottom of the syllabus explains the hybrid grading model. Okay. Now, the other thing is we have this in-class project work. I'm not taking attendance, but there are 7 course dates that you'll see when I go through the schedule where I say there's in-class project work. Okay. If you don't come to class, that's your choice. You still have to do the work. You won't get a grade for it. It's just to help you prepare for the project. Okay. I will grade it in class. I will just come around, check everybody's off. If you're here and you did the work, you're going to get credit for it on those days. Okay. If you choose not to come to class, you miss those 10 points per class. That's 70 points. All right. Then you're going to do 2 types of updates. I call these easy points, by the way. The updates are easy. They're not a lot of points. I think they're 2 or 3% each. But that's just based on meeting with your team and meeting, and updating me on things. So we're going to have a small Scrum team with a project leader or Scrum master, and then we're going to have individuals doing updates to me. Okay? Your groups don't see your individual updates. That's how I know that there's no issues going on in groups. Okay, so the Scrum updates are going to be those questions that if you've had me before, what did this person work on, or sorry, what did this group work on last week? What are you going to work on this week? And are there any issues? Okay, your Scrum Master is going to prepare that, upload it to a Dropbox in Cougar Courses, and then you're also going to verbally, we're going to do what's called a stand-up meeting at the beginning of class every week. And we're not going to take more than 5 minutes to do it, which means people are going to have to be very concise in the way that they speak, the Scrum Masters, okay? They're going to give an update to the whole class of what that group worked on for the previous week. It holds everybody accountable. Individually, you're also going to upload your own individual updates to me so that I can make sure that you're on track and not having issues. That includes things like if your Scrum Master is being a jerk, okay, or your team's not getting along. I'm going to not play games if there's a Scrum Master who's just not working out well, they're not getting things done on time, or there are any issues, they're not the Scrum Master anymore, or pick someone else. Okay? We're not going to play games and give people second chances. We don't have the time in this course because we only meet once a week, okay? Now you can submit discussions late, subject to that penalty, okay? Labs late, there are only 2 labs in this class. Okay? There's 7 to choose from, but you only have to pick 2. And the risk assessment part of the project you can do late. So if your group's falling behind on that or individually, you can submit that late. Okay? Aside from that, you won't be able to submit things late. No makeups on assignments or exams. Okay? We need to keep a cadence. I did provide some extra credit labs though, so if you want to do extra credit labs, you're welcome to do that, and that'll make up some points. Each lab, when it's extra credit, it's only worth 10 points though, okay? So if you miss one of those weeks where we're doing class work, that's worth 10 points. You could offset it with 1 lab, okay? I have not set up the extra credit boxes, and that actually brings me to the point that you and, who was it talked to me earlier? I can't remember, you, okay. The MI Society, if you go to their meetings, you'll be able to get the regular meetings that they have every 2 weeks, right? You'll be able to get extra credit in this course. If you go to one of their larger meetings where they have guest speakers from industry, you'll get more points. I haven't figured out how many points would be fair for each meeting, but if you go, they'll keep track. You don't need to tell me. They'll send me a note with everybody who attended, okay? So make sure that you're using their sign-in form. Yes? Is that on top of the extra credit if we do that? So all that will count as extra credit, yeah. Yep. Okay, so that gets me to this point, okay? If you don't think that you can keep up with the work that concerns you, I won't think anything less of you if you decide to drop the course, okay? It won't hurt my feelings, okay? Okay. This is a simulated, similar to the senior experience. We're treating it kind of similar to that, okay? Except it's not a real company. We're just doing stuff inside the class here, okay? So just be aware that you need to keep up on the work. The attendance, I'm not going to take attendance. I'm offering that live stream, okay? Now here's the thing, technology could break, okay? Another thing is those captions that are automatic, they'll be there almost immediately within a day. The real captions from the library your guess is as good as mine when they'll get them done. They take time to do, okay, from the time I send them to them. And I won't be able to send them to the next morning. So once I send them to the library, figure three plus days for them to get them back to me, and then I'll post them on the website, okay? If that concerns you, what you can always do is see if someone in the class is willing to take notes, and at least in the transcription, and we can see if there's any volunteers who want to do that, maybe for a little bit of extra credit each time, okay? But if you're willing to wait, you can get the transcription from the library. If you're absent, everything you should need is in the syllabus or on the website. You shouldn't need to email me. It's okay if you're absent, just look it up and see what you need to do, okay? So this is just explaining the project work. So if you miss one of those, just be aware of that. But you also miss out on being able to ask questions live, okay? You might miss out on context that happens in the classroom, okay? So this is not an online class, but I am streaming it for you. You might fall behind if you don't attend class, so just keep that in mind. Okay? I know that some of you have to commute a long distance from far away places, okay? So I understand that. I'm going to try to post grades throughout the term. Once I post it, you have to tell me within a week if there's something wrong, okay? And I'll regrade it, but I regrade the whole thing, not just whatever question. So if you have a question about your exam and you think I did it wrong, which by the way, those are the exam questions from the book, so maybe they did do it wrong, I don't know, okay? The whole thing gets graded. And what I've seen with this, because this is actually a policy that I've adopted from UCR, students who do this and want me to regrade it, it never ends well. They end up with a lower grade when they go back and regrade it. Just for whatever reason, I go through and look at other things, and I start going through and I noticed that other things maybe were wrong, and so they actually got a lower score. I've never seen a student, their grade went up from it, okay? So you're welcome to do it, but it may not end well, is all I can say, okay? The hybrid grading policy, I'm going to talk about that in a second. So there's 1,000 points, okay? Even if you get extra credit, the most you can get here at Cal State is an A. Okay? There's no A+. Believe me, I wish there was, because a lot of people get an A+. Okay? You can equate the percentage equivalent and then the letter grade here, okay? Everything's going to be submitted through Cougar Courses except that in-class deliverable that we do together, okay? So everything else you should do in Cougar Courses. Here's a breakdown of what's individual and what's group, okay? So please read through this, should answer your questions. Here's the assignments though, okay? 5% is going to be those discussions. So if you miss a discussion, you forget to do it, and you miss the 1 week window, it's only 1% or 10 points, okay? So it's not significant. And if you do it, you get credit. If you don't do it, you don't get credit. It's simple grading, okay? The exams, I've decided, and I've actually already done them. I did them over the weekend. So they're multiple choice and true and false, and I discarded all the other questions from the textbook publishers. So they're just going to be multiple choice. Some of them are scenario based. I looked at them and I said, oh, this is gonna be tough. If I don't read the book, I wouldn't be able to pass the test, okay? Just from looking at the questions. So beware of that, but it's open book, open note, okay? So you can go in ahead of time, figure out what you need to study. That should help you out, okay? The labs, they're gonna be 2, and they're pass fail. So either you made a good faith effort, okay? If you get stuck, document the errors. Try to understand what's going wrong, okay? If you document all that, even if you get stumped, you'll probably get credit for it, okay, because you tried. The extra labs are worth only 10 points each though, so if you do the extra ones. Now, there are 5 technical ones. I'd say 4 of them are extremely difficult, but if you're technically inclined, which some people last semester were very technically inclined, those ones might be easy for you to do, okay? There's one that I would say is intermediate, and then the 2 business ones should be easy for anybody to do, okay? They're not technical at all. The project is worth the bulk of your grade, but this column here represents how the scoring is going to be. So your Scrum updates weekly, the group ones, are going to be a group grade. So how did your group perform? Did they turn in the minutes, etc.? It's only 3% of your grade. The weekly Scrum updates you give to me individually, those are just an individual grade. So if you do them, you get the points. There's no accounting for the rest of your group, okay? The information security policy and procedures and the I scroll down here to the security education stuff. The way it works is it's hybrid, okay? 50% is going to be based on your contributions using the COBRA rubrics, okay? Then 25% will be based on what your Scrum group did. And I'll explain how this is going to work. You're basically going to footnote or in-text citation who did what in it, okay? So the policy document will have categories, and in it you will say Scrum group 1, 2, 3, or whatever did it, right? Within that section of your Scrum group, individually, you're also going to put parentheses around the sections that you did individually, okay? I'm going to go through and first look at your individual contributions relative to the rubric, and then that's going to be 50% of the points, okay? Then I'm going to go through and do the same thing for the whole section for your Scrum group. That's 25% of the points. And then finally, I'm going to look at the whole document for the whole class, and 25% based on the overall quality of the document. So I'll explain how that's going to work here in a second, right? The risk assessment, though, is only based on your group and your individual. It's not a class assignment. It's going to be based on individually and your small groups working on that. So I think that we'll probably have 8 groups would be my guess, which means we'll have 8 risk assessments that you'll turn in, okay, 1 for each group. All right. So what that means is most of the points are going to be based on individual, and then an equal portion group and class-wide, okay, for the overall contributions. And then the last thing here is the in-class, that's individual. You do it or you don't, okay? And then that'll just be me doing an assessment in class. And that's it, okay? The exams are only worth, I think, what is it, 32%? 32% of your grade, so about a third, okay? So if you don't test well, okay, you still will probably do pretty well in the course if you do well in the project. Okay. All right, so now this hybrid grading is a little new. So I'm going to talk about that in a second. There are 5 discussions. You need to make sure you update it to the Dropbox as well. If you don't do that and you just do it in Slack, I'm not going to grade based in Slack. It's too difficult. Those of you who had me last semester know what I'm talking about, okay? I missed some people and I had to go back and fix it, okay? So just upload it to Cougar Courses as a screenshot and you're good to go. Read the exam section carefully here, okay? So there are no issues. Talked about the lab. The project instructions are on the website. It's easier for me to update the website than it is to keep updating the syllabus, okay? It also keeps the syllabus a little shorter. Now the schedule's all here. And so here's the way we're going to do the assignments. I know that sometimes your weekends are a little hard, and so it's hard to submit things on Sunday night. I think most professors do Sunday night to submit things, right? So I'm doing it, they're due by 6:30 p.m. tonight. Okay, so you have time before class if you need to rush and get things done, okay? Unless I note otherwise in the table here. So if there's no date or time listed, then it's due by 6:30 p.m. on the Tuesday, okay? So most things you'll see, there's nothing due tonight. You don't need to worry about that. But if there's mandatory in-class work, it's here. Mandatory meaning you won't get a grade if you don't show up, okay? You can decide that on your own. The discussions are peppered throughout. The project work, you'll see those with the yes. The labs, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, I did all the labs at the end. Yeah, so all the labs are due at the end of April. So you don't have to be in a rush to get those done. You can take your time on those, okay? The way that the project's going to work is our first major deliverable is going to be the security materials, which will be due the week of the 10th of March. Okay, so that's the first deliverable the whole class will do is those project training materials. And then you're going to have a risk assessment due right before spring break. Okay, that'll be the last thing you do before spring break. When you come back, we're going to be focusing on the policy and procedures for the rest of the class. So we'll be doing that. Those will be due on the 7th, which is the day after the last class, okay? So what I envision doing for the policy and procedures is we'll do Google Documents, okay? And I'm gonna probably do them, I'm probably gonna have to share them from my other Google account with the class, okay? So, because I don't have a Google account here. So I'll probably share them with my UCR account to the whole class so that everybody can contribute, okay? Now, there's a very important thing in the syllabus about submissions. One of the things you have to do for the policy is when your group is done with your portion, there's a Dropbox in Cougar Courses. You're not going to submit the policy to that. You're going to submit the word completed. So I know that your group has completed your portion, okay? If you don't do that, that comes into that category in the rubric of didn't follow directions. So make sure you do that. It's such an easy thing to do, okay? I'll know that it's done when everybody's done that for the group, okay? Or we hit that date, whatever comes first, okay? So that means you actually have right up until right before finals week starts, okay? The final exam's due on the normal date. Okay? You'll probably have a week or two to work on it, okay? The midterm exam, you have more time to look at it and work on it, okay? I don't want anybody to feel pressure to do it right away just because it's out there. It's out there so you can practice and get some studying habits for what you need, okay? Now, this grading policy illustration is looking at, let's say, individually you get a B, okay, in terms of the number of points. The scrum group gets an A minus, and the class overall gets a D, okay? This usually means that a bunch of teams didn't pull their weight, okay? So let's say, just say the class portion, the class as a whole just didn't do a good job because a lot of teams just didn't do a good job, okay? It can really impact everybody's grade on that project. So we all have to work as a team, okay? If a group's struggling, we need to help them out, just like if we were a team in a company, okay? This is not the time to be cutthroat with everybody, okay? That's why I'm the project manager, because I want to help you guys get used to working on these big projects that you're going to do when you leave here, okay? So you can go through and you can see how the individual grade was calculated, how the group grade was calculated in that scenario, and then the class grade, okay? Here's another example. Individual does an A level work, the group does A minus, but again, the team as a whole does a D, okay? It can drop someone who might get an A otherwise to a B plus. So we all have to work together to do the best possible document, okay? I think this is better than you each doing a group document because now it's less work because we're splitting it amongst 40 people, okay? I assume that everybody's going to add the class that wants to be in it. So that's 40 people working on this document that you would normally have a large team in an organization doing versus 5 people working on it, okay, to produce the same document that the other classes in the past have done, okay. The last example I have here is if the class does a B level and everybody, the individual in the group do an A level, okay, we end up with an A minus, okay. If the whole class had done an A level, we would get an A, okay. So it's everybody's benefit to do well and help each other out, okay. By doing those status reports, that's how I know whether people are pulling their weight. If there's an issue, then I can address it early, okay. That being said, I've set up Slack. What I don't want to do is, there's a whole list of things of don't do to Slack, okay, out on the website, mainly because last time I would get so many messages from people every time their group would be discussing something, I'd get tagged. Rule is don't ever tag me, okay? If you want to talk to me, bring it up in your Scrum update to class, okay? I don't need to be an FYI and any message in Slack. I honestly can't keep up. If you have a question, it's best to ask it and ask the professor, okay? There's nothing secretive. I don't want to discuss grades on there, I won't. If you ask me a grading question, I'm just going to ignore your message, okay? And if it keeps happening, you won't ever hear a response from me. You need to talk about things that are, if they're about the project or something, the whole class is going to benefit from your questions, so don't be shy, okay? Ask it. I guarantee you someone else is thinking and hasn't asked it yet, okay? Slack, you had the permissions to set up private channels. I've disabled public channels because groups would get confused and accidentally set up a public, and then I have to go in and delete everybody and help them recreate it. You can set up private channels if you want for your Scrum groups. I encourage it. You don't need to add me to it, okay? In the past, I had you add me. You don't need to add me, okay? We're going to treat this just like a regular project where you're going to give your updates to me on Tuesday when we come to class, okay? So if you have a question, post it and ask the professor, or just ask it in classes. You know, you've got a blocking issue, okay? Any questions? I know it's a lot to digest. If anybody wants to leave, I won't think less of you, okay? Does anybody want to leave? Okay. All right, who wants to add the class? Okay, are you all on the wait list? Okay, so I'm going to go in the order and I'll call the name. If you're not on my list here, or if you're on my list and I call you, you don't raise your hand or come up here, then I'm going to cross you off and move to the next person, okay? So very important. First one is Madison. Is that you? Okay. So this is this top permission number is going to be the one that you need. And I would use it right away. And I'm going to write you down for that one. The next one is Noah. Okay. Be a little tougher for me. Well, I think I can get back here. You want this second permission number, and you want to use it as soon as possible. Okay. Okay. While I'm doing this, think about who might want to be a Scrum Master, okay? I need probably 7 or 8 people to volunteer. Next person is Kevin. Okay, so you can use this permission number here. Okay, thanks. All right, next one is going to be Matt. Saw you earlier, okay. So you're going to use this number here, 677-902. Okay. You want to use this as soon as possible just in case someone overhears it so they can't get in, okay? All right. The next one is Alan. Is Alan here? Yeah, what? Once I'm done with this, yes. Yeah. You're gonna get, if you're volunteering to be a Scrum Master, you're gonna get interviewed by me, okay? So I'm gonna have you all stand up at the front. Okay. So if you don't want to do that, you may not want to be a Scrum Master. All right, so Alan, this one is yours. 082. Mm-hmm. Now someone may drop the class, so it's a type Emmanuel. Okay, yours is going to be 515-520. 520. Okay. All right. Now the last person I have space for, I don't have a permission number until these get used. That's why I need you to use them. They won't give me any more. Okay. So David. Okay. What you need to do is send me an email saying that you need a permission number. I'm going to forward it to Christina, and tomorrow she'll request it. I don't know when academics will get it taken care of. Okay. If I did not call your name, which means Blake, Cameron, and Emily. Are you all here, by the way? Blake, Cameron, not here? Not on the list anymore. Okay, Emily? Okay, I don't see her either. She's in my class before. Okay, so the situation with you is if someone else drops, I can get a permission number for you. So your best bet is to attend class and email me that you are next on the list, and that will remind me tomorrow to ask for a number if someone else drops. Okay, it would be helpful if you do drop the class. If you want to drop me a courtesy email to say that you dropped it, just so that I know. Okay, to let the last person in who wants on the list. Okay, all right. Please add those numbers tonight if you can, because I can't get more until you add them. Okay, it's very important. All right, so let's do the Scrum groups. Okay, so what we're going to do is, this is all in the syllabus, okay, which is linked from Cougar Courses. I need the whiteboard for the Scrum Masters. Okay, who wants to be a Scrum Master? Anybody else? Only 2 people? 3 people? Okay. I got to have more than 3, okay? Let me tell you what the Scrum Master is going to do, okay? In the past, we've had the concept of a CEO. This is not a CEO. Okay? All that this person needs to do is ask those questions in your meeting and write them down for me, okay, and submit them. That's the only obligation of the Scrum Master. And then verbally in class, speak at the beginning. You don't even have to get up here in the front to do it, okay? It's called a stand-up for a reason. You stand up where you are, you give your brief update, you're very concise. There's 5 minutes. I hope there'll be 7 or 8 groups, which means less than a minute per person, okay? Should be very quick. And then I don't need individual status when we do the verbal thing. It's just so everybody is aware of what every group's doing, okay? So if you're interested, come up here, and because I want you to write down your availability, okay, for meetings. And that's how we're going to dictate where people choose to go into the groups, okay? Taking student feedback, okay, from last time. Like when you're available to meet with people, either virtually or in person. You don't need to meet in person if you don't want to, okay? If your team's okay meeting virtually through Zoom, Google, whatever it might be, I don't know what else is out there, Snapchat or whatever it is, okay? You guys can choose how you want to meet. You don't have to meet in person, okay? But again, it's not like the CEO in the past, so it's not a boss type role where you're having to funnel people. That's my job, okay? So the main thing is you're just gathering status. So I have 1 person on Tuesday. Okay. So what we'll go through is we'll have everybody introduce themselves and then put your name up there and what your general availability is. Okay. I have 4 markers. I might have more. There's 2 more here. I don't know if they work or not. Those ones should work. These ones are, who knows. Okay. So we got 5 volunteers. Anybody else? Nobody else? 6 people? We can make that work. Can we be more specific on the availability for manual? Because you obviously have classes. Yeah, can you put that up there? Because that's going to make it easier for people to pick. You're still crashing some courses. Can you put up what you think it might be if you got into those courses? Roughly. It gives people a better idea of when you're available, that's all. Yeah. Or if there's times you know that you'll be available because there are no classes. Okay. All right. We didn't get like a ton of people. I thought we get a ton of people, so I don't really need to do interviews, but I do want the person to talk about kind of their approach of how they're going to do this. And maybe you've got someone in mind, okay, but at least people can introduce themselves, okay? I know most folks on the board. I don't know a couple people, okay? What's that? You weren't talking to me. Not really. I guess on your resume, you can say you were the Scrum Master for this InfoSec project, you know? I'm going to have you go up at the end of class and pick the groups you're in, and you need to write it down. So I'm going to write the names and the numbers. Okay, the names are up there. I'm going to write the numbers by them. Okay, and you need to write down what one you joined. Okay, now I'm going to basically say if we've got 6 people, here's what we need to do then. We've got 40 people in the class. It doesn't divide evenly. So we'll do 6 per group, and then I'll allow the other 4 people to go into 4 groups for a 7th person, okay? And they can pick. It could be up to 7, but I'm only going to write 6 numbers. Okay. Oh, hey, one other thing. I'm just going to request, please. No, like names. Okay, it's really confusing as it is with a lot of people. So when we're doing the scrum, it's just your group number. Okay, no naming. If you want to internally name your group, I don't really care. Like I know you've named your groups in the past, Jim. I don't care what the name is. Don't want to ever hear reference to it. It's just going to confuse my brain. I'm getting old. Okay, so that's just the number. So these are the group numbers. Okay, 6 people per group. There's going to be 4 people who won't fit. You can pick a group and go 7 into a group. Okay, all right. Maybe I'll just make this easier. I'll write 7, and then you can just pick the group that you want to be in. How's that? That's my 7 when I'm writing on a board like that, okay? All right. So at the end of class, you're going to go up and you're going to pick your groups, okay? Make sure you do it before you leave, okay? So number 1 is going to be Emmanuel's group. These are the groups that I will actually assign you to in Cougar courses, okay? So Wyatt's going to be group 2. Dane's going to be 3. Jim's going to be 4, Evan's going to be 5, and Michelle's going to be 6. Okay, and thank you for volunteering, all of you. Okay, I really appreciate it. It's going to make the project go much smoother since we have actual small groups, okay? It's too much for me to have to maintain the cadence. All right, so now let's go ahead and start into the material that I have here. I don't know how far we'll get into it. We'll just have to see, okay? But any questions before I move on? Yes. Let's just keep it at 7 at the most, because it's.
I'm saying if more than 7 want to join, can I decide between, or how does that work? Whoever
First 7 that sign up are in the group. Yeah. Okay. Very confident. I don't know. Maybe everyone wants to be in your group. I don't know. I have no idea. All right. So we're going to start talking about the introduction, okay, to the material. Like I said, you really need to read the book. This is not going to be enough to pass the test. Okay. So when we're talking about information security, this is working. Yeah, this looks like it's working. We're talking about confidentiality, integrity, and availability. You're going to see this in InfoSec programs. You're going to see it on websites about security, et cetera. Okay. If you've been in my class before, Gordon has come in for, I think, I forget what classes he came into now, but he's coming to several, and he's talked about security. Cloud class, he's coming to, I think, the database class, and he's coming to MIS418, I believe, okay, if I'm not mistaken. This is something he presents in his slides as well, okay? By the way, I'm going to try to get him to come in here because this is a more advanced class, and actually see if he can talk and maybe do some labs, okay, some technical labs if anybody's interested. That we'd probably do outside of class or something. But the actual speaking in class, I want to see if he's available to actually come in and talk about a bit about the policy side of security. He hasn't done that before. He's just talked at a high level about the technical side. Okay, so confidentiality, we're limiting the information access. So we have security policies and procedures. We do training and education to educate our users. We use encryption to secure the data. We might utilize secure storage, and then we classify the data. So just like the military and the government does things like secret and top secret or polygraph. Anybody ex-military here? You know what I'm talking about, okay? Even the networks in the government are segmented off, okay? Now, in business, we classify data as well. So we might have stuff, and by the way, the classifications, this is one of the things as part of the policy is you're going to write a classification policy, or someone, I should say, is going to write a classification of data policy, okay, of what the different data types are. So there might be public, there might be confidential, there might be restricted, there might be highly restricted, okay. The highly restricted being the stuff we don't want anybody to find out, the secret sauce in the recipe of, the Burger King special sauce, or the KFC chicken's recipe, okay? That's a highly confidential secret we don't want anybody to get to, okay? We're gonna classify accordingly, and that might dictate how we store the data, what level of encryption we use, and how it's treated from a policy perspective, okay? So I know in the syllabus, I'm a little ambiguous when I say information security policy and procedures, okay? It's pretty broad, okay? We're gonna define what that means later on in the class. Integrity, we're protecting against damage, destruction, and corruption of the data, okay? So that's gonna be another aspect. It does us no good to go and protect with encryption and things like that if we aren't actually protecting the integrity of the data as well. So if we encrypt it and then the disk gets damaged or something and we lose the data, we really didn't protect it all that well, okay? Availability, we want to make it available to authorized users, not to just anybody. Okay? Very key, it has to be to only authorized users. We don't want to just go put it out in a public bucket in AWS where everybody can go get to it, okay? We want to make sure it's only available to those who are authorized. We also want to provide access to the usable format. That's part of availability, okay? So if I have a database, we were talking that when the class started, okay? I have a MongoDB database. I need to provide it in a readable format, okay? If I provide it in a format that's not readable by someone else, there's not much use in making it available, okay? And we're providing the available access to information. Okay. Now, privacy, information, this is another aspect, by the way. Okay. So information is collected, used, and stored only for permitted purposes, and it has to be disclosed when you collect it. This is an area we're going to talk a bit more about later on. Some of you have had a little bit of a brief introduction in the cloud class. Okay. The California law for privacy took effect 3 weeks ago now. Okay. It now applies. The business hypothetical I've provided on the website should give you a clue as to where we need to start looking at particular policies. Privacy, it's going to be important. We know that the company, the hypothetical company, if you haven't read the hypothetical yet, is a store, a chain of stores. I don't remember what I called it, Cougar Mart or something like that. Okay, I always come up with these really creative names. Not so much. It's based in California. Okay, it's a large presence. California privacy law is going to apply. I also mentioned that it does business in New York. New York has a privacy statute on the books. Okay. I also mentioned that it has European locations. That should be a clue. We'll get to it eventually for everybody. But if you did take the class last semester, you'll know, oh, GDPR, right? So if you took the cloud class, you've got a little bit of knowledge to get you into the course to understand it. But that's okay. We're going to cover it for everybody later on. Okay? You're going to have to think about it. What privacy aspects are going to fall into place for this policy? What do we need to think about? Okay. I've given some ideas, so hopefully people are taking notes or will listen to the recording later. Okay. By the way, I'm really not listening to music here. This is the best way for you to hear me on the recording is to have it around my neck there. You can get a good sound from these headphones. All right. Privacy in the information security context, though, is not what you might think of freedom from observation by others. Okay. We're not talking about your individual right to not have your data observed by others. Okay. We're talking about whether it can be collected, used, and stored, and only for purposes we've disclosed when we ask you for that permission. Okay. So we're not talking about your inalienable right to privacy, which doesn't exist, by the way, in this country, but we're not talking about that. Okay. At least in the information security context. That's a whole debate for another course, okay? And not in the business school. Protection mechanisms. How do we provide protection? We use policy. So we have privacy policies, we have security policies, we have data classification policies. Okay? The policy tells us what we need to do. Okay? The procedures are how we actually implement. So we'll start by writing policies that are going to be very broad, and everybody's going to take on a portion of the policies. And I hope that you'll take things that are of interest to you. Okay? Although if no one's of interest to certain areas and we have to cover them, then we'll pick who gets to do it. Okay. The training and awareness kind of fits into the policy and the procedures, though. How do you make users aware of their obligations under the policy? Okay. How do we make them aware of what procedures they need to follow? We do training and awareness. Okay. So that could be things like having classes, okay, like this. This could be providing videos online for people to watch. And this could be, even doing testing materials. So I wouldn't be opposed to students in this class coming up with tests to back up the video. So they watch the video and then there's a test that they need to take, okay? These are all fair game for that education aspect of the course of you get to pick what curriculum you think we need, okay? And then the technology, okay? How many of you are interested in the technology aspect of this, of security, okay? So a few of you, well, you'll be thinking about things like intrusion detection and protection systems, penetration testing, okay? I don't know who came up with that name, by the way. It's like the Sharder thing in my other class, and everybody laughed about that, okay? But there's protection mechanisms like technology, okay? That's another aspect that you're going to need to think about. Now, this is Professor, the artist, okay? Not too proud of it. This is the intersection of these different concepts. So we have confidentiality, integrity, and availability on the bottom. We have computer security, data security, network security, and then we have the policy that crosses across them all. Okay. There's a better drawing in the book, but they have paid artists. Okay. And then we have this McCumber cube, which you can read about in the book, but effectively you've got the CIA, you've got the storage, processing, and transmission, then you've got the technology, education, and policy, okay? Each one of these representing a cube in this McCumber cube. Okay. You should read the book about that section in particular, okay? Access control. So we have things like identification, okay? when I went to unlock my office, the police officer made me show my identification. Okay. Then he authenticated that it was a valid identification for the university. Okay. Then he said, "Are you authorized to have access to this office?" And I just pointed at the sheet on the wall, and it showed my name in that office. Okay. Not probably the best way to do it, but whatever to do. Okay. And then accountability around the logging and events. So earlier, the discussion, in case you weren't paying attention at the beginning before we started the lecture, there was a discussion around the elk stack. There's a lab to do the elk stack and set it up. It's actually fairly easy to do, especially if you've taken some other classes that I've had, okay? You probably know how to use some of the more technical things. The elk stack stands for Elasticsearch, Logstash, and Kibana. It's basically a way to visualize this accountability, visualize all of the data coming in from all of your different information systems in a single dashboard, okay? But if you go to it and you set it up and you start collecting that data, you'll pretty quickly be overwhelmed just by that vast amount of data. Every time, if you set it up and you go through that lab, you can send data from your own laptop to it and see all those security events for your laptop, okay? And then visualize and look at time periods, okay? If you had many different data sources, you could then start doing event correlation between, okay, well, our website got slow. What caused it to get slow? We dig in a little bit into these system logs and we'd see, oh, well, the system got slow, but at the same time, we all logged into the Wi-Fi in here and started streaming YouTube, okay? So we can do event correlation to see what caused something to happen, okay? These tools like the Elk Stack, another one is Splunk, okay? You're not gonna be able to go take Splunk for a test drive, but you can take Elk for a test drive. It's an open source product, okay? And they have a cloud version you can sign up for a free trial to do that lab. Okay? If you're gonna do that lab though, you have to do it within 14 days or they shut off your trial. Okay? Which leads me to one other thing. If you're doing any of the labs in this class, you don't need a credit card. Okay? Those of you who've had me before, you're probably gonna tune me out, and that's okay. You don't need a credit card for anything in my courses, okay? If you get asked for one, then you did something wrong. Now, I'm going to provide access to, for this class, you're going to need to use AWS. You can get that on your own. You just sign up for AWS Educate using your CSU account, okay? If you want to do the technical lab, you'll have to do that. There's a link in not the syllabus, on the website, I believe, to how to do that, okay? You can sign up for that. You get free access. Educate no longer requires a credit card. When your credit is expired or runs out, your account just gets closed, okay? And then you can sign up for another one if you want, okay? We aren't going to use Google Cloud in this class. So sorry if you were used to using Google Cloud, we're not going to use it in this class. Okay? But the Elk Stack, you can go download, you can sign up. You don't need a credit card. I tested it out. I made a video as well. So if you don't know how to do it, you'll get a video, no sound, by the way. So don't be thinking, oh, Professor, the sound doesn't work on my computer. There's no sound, okay? I hate my voice on recording. So I just walked through it, recorded the screen, and you're good to go. Okay. All right, so moving on, identification. So we recognize the individual users. This is usually a username, by the way. So mine is T Underhill, okay? It's pretty common. You know it's because my email address, okay? But it could be other types of ID as well. It could be, we've got an ex-military in the room here, so it could be a CAP card. Okay, the military's CAP card. It's a smart card. It could be one way of doing identification. Okay, by flashing it. By the way, okay. Authentication. We're validating, okay, you're who you say you are, and we can do that with passwords, pins, passphrases. Okay. But that does not specify what we can actually access. It's just a validation of who we are. Okay? Authorization is what gives us access to a system. So we're going to have different access levels or permissions. Okay? And one of the requirements of, say, Sarbanes-Oxley, which is a regulation for public companies or companies that are going to go public, is that you have separation of duties. Okay? That stems from, anybody tell me what that stems from, by the way? The SOX Act? Enron, yes, one of them. Another one is MCI, WorldCom. Okay? Big scandals. So as a result, we have SOX now, and SOX requires that the people who have access to the data, privilege access, don't have access to the systems and vice versa. Okay, so we have to have a separation. We provide that with access levels, and there's many ways we can do that. And so on the campus here, we use Microsoft Authentication, And that's used for different campus systems, and they use that as kind of their identity provider. Okay. Other places use providers like Auth0. I can't think of, Okta is another one. Okay. Um, those can be used to provide access levels to different systems. So in your organization, you would define, if I want access to the payroll system at the level to go view everybody's paychecks, the person must be at a, say, a director level within the finance department. Okay. We can define those access levels. Okay. Accountability, auditing, logging, and tracking all activities. Okay. One of the things that systems today do is they count for everything. Okay? And it can be a lot of data. So that's why we use a system like an Elk Stack to be able to visualize the data. Otherwise, we'd be overwhelmed with the amount of data. Okay? And it's difficult because I don't have access to a real production one to show you. But if I showed you a real production one, it would be constantly, every millisecond, sending in gigabytes of data that you would have to go analyze by hand if you were doing it just by looking at the system logs. Okay. We can't sit there and look at all the individual system logs and know what's happening. It's all noise to us. So a tool like that allows us to see through all the noise. Okay. We can find that needle in the haystack. Right. Now, threats. These are potential risks. So we can have different types of threat events. Okay. We can have an attack. This can damage or compromise information or systems. We can have an exploit. This is illegally using information systems or information for our gain. Okay. And then we can have a vulnerability, which is a potential weakness. Okay. May not have been exploited yet, but it's a potential vulnerability. And one of the things that the guest speaker in the past has said is, well, we end up with vulnerabilities that never get addressed. So every year, the top 10 vulnerabilities, several of them tend to be the top 10 every year, year after year, because we just are not addressing them. Okay. Review that table in the book for the categories of threats. Okay. I didn't want to reproduce it. Otherwise, I couldn't stream the lectures. Okay. Small price to pay. Now, let's talk about intellectual property. Okay. I kind of alluded to trade secrets earlier when I talked about ultra secret things we don't want anybody else to know, like the secret 9 herbs and spices or whatever it is that KFC has. Okay. That's a trade secret. It's been protected for a long time. Things we want to keep secret and we don't want people to get, we protect our trade secrets. Well, how do we protect that from an employee perspective or a partner perspective? We use non-disclosure agreements. Okay. So I will show some examples later in the course of how we protect ourselves with the non-disclosure agreement. We will want to make sure we incorporate that into our policy. Okay. Now, trade secrets, there are laws to protect that. If an employee goes and violates that agreement, then there's trade secret laws that actually will protect the organization, and they can go after the employee for stealing a trade secret. Okay, you see lawsuits happen all the time in this area. Now, if on the other hand, we want to protect something that's critical to us with a guarantee that if someone figures it out, we get the license, we get a licensing revenue, we protect it, we're the only ones who can use it, we use what's called a patent. So with a trade secret, you always run the risk that, by the way, I should clarify, I actually have a law degree, so I'm not just making this stuff up, okay? This is actually stuff I'm teaching you that's related to law. So trade secrets, when we run the risk with a trade secret of that trade secret getting leaked, okay? The special sauce getting leaked or whatever, okay? So we don't have an exclusive right. If that trade secret gets leaked somehow and someone replicates it, we could litigate it potentially, but we run that risk of it getting out and then it's not a secret anymore. No matter what we do, we can't hide the secret again. If it's already out there on the internet, then we're kind of screwed and we can't hide it again. Okay. Patents, however, basically say that from the very beginning, we're going to file a patent which gives you the instructions on how to do our secret sauce. But if we get the patent issued, then no one can make the secret sauce for some period of time without paying us a licensing fee. Okay. So that's a benefit of a patent. Now, trade secrets don't cost us anything to protect other than have good policies, hiring attorneys to be able to prosecute if someone tries to steal it. Okay. Patents are very expensive. So Oracle filed a patent when I worked there. It cost them a lot of money. I won't say how much because I'm being recorded, but a lot of money, okay? These are very expensive to set up. Okay? You have to have lawyers draft them. There's a lot of documentation involved, and it can be very costly, okay? But if you get a patent issued, then that means you have the exclusive right to use that patent. And if anybody else wants to use it, they have to pay you a licensing fee that you negotiate. Okay. Otherwise, you can sue them. Trademarks are another way of protecting intellectual property. So, for example, the McDonald's golden arch symbol is a trademark. Okay, it's protected. I can't go create McDougal's or something, okay, and copy that golden arch because that's misappropriation of their trademark. Okay, copyright is something that we all can do, and we don't actually have to pay anything for copyright. Okay, so copyright's a little unique. You used to have a notice on it, copyright 2019, blah 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 blah. Okay, that's been done away with. Okay, so now if you create something, you can assert your right to the copyright. Okay, so if you create something and someone copies it, then if you wanted to spend the money on a lawyer and you thought you had a good case, you could go after them. Okay, you don't need to do anything special. Okay? You just have to be able to prove that you were the first person to create it. Okay, so a lot of the copyright rules changed with Disney because Disney was going to lose their copyright of Mickey Mouse and things like that. So they changed a lot of the laws. Okay? That's not the only reason. We also joined international treaties with like the European Union and China and some other places. And when we did that, we had to change our laws to be compatible with the rest of the world. So that actually affected our patents as well. So the way that we do patents is different now than it used to be. Okay? That's getting into that depth is a little outside the scope of this course. Okay, you had a question or a comment? Mhm. So I can't give you legal advice, but I can say that those sites that you post on have a non-exclusive right to republish anything you write on any public site like that. You read their terms and conditions. Okay. Now, that being said, it's entirely possible. Yeah. So those things generally, like say Twitter, they're actually a good example is recently there was a Twitter ad campaign, and I don't know if you've heard about it in like the New York subway. And they went out and they pulled a bunch of tweets that had to do with Twitter, and they post them all in the subway. And even though they aren't required under their terms of service to compensate people, they gave them like swag packages. Okay, but it's their content. But Twitter, because you're using Twitter's platform in their terms of service, say that you give them a right to use it. So, but the answer to your question is probably you do have the ability to copyright it if it's your own original work. You probably don't need to do anything, and if someone copies it, you can probably go after them. But it all depends, as any lawyer will tell you. Okay, all depends on the circumstances. So IP risks. So here's some of the risks. First of all, trade secret leakage. I mentioned if someone gets your trade secret. Okay, this has happened with companies. They hire someone, they get all the secret sauce, and then they leave and they go to a competitor. Okay, this is why when you sign an NDA, you want to be very careful. Okay, because if you go and leave and go somewhere else, you don't want to mention anything about the details of your former employer because, and most companies that are reputable will say we don't want to know anything about your secret sauce. You agree when you come here, you're not going to talk about your former employer. You're not going to bring any customers. You're not going to bring any employee information. And they do that because they don't want to get sued. Okay. Now, there are some companies that say, we want to know what you have in your secret sauce, but don't tell anybody. Okay. Another area is software piracy. Okay. And please don't tell me if you do this. Okay. I don't want to know, feign ignorance here. Okay. Software piracy is basically say you get Microsoft Office off some website. Okay, you get a code or something to use it, okay, but you didn't pay for it. That's another risk. Okay, Microsoft probably invested a lot of money into building their software. So when you take it, that's stealing. Software piracy, by the way, these days is less common because of the protections that they put in place. It's crippled and it has to activate itself to a legitimate service. I don't know because I never pirated, but I think it's probably very difficult these days to pirate software. Not impossible, probably very difficult. Okay. Media piracy, on the other hand, is still very easy for people to do, and they do it, and they think there's nothing wrong with it. But if you think about it from the business's perspective, okay, the business is let's use music for example. Okay, a recording industry company, maybe they overcharge for the music. I don't know. When I'm paying $14 a month for unlimited access to all the music in the world. Okay, I kind of feel like that's a fair price to pay. But media piracy is basically taking something that belongs to a company, okay, and think about it from the company's perspective. You have to fight for when that happens, because if you don't, you lose your rights. Okay, you could lose your rights. So I had this guy I went to law school with who basically drives a Porsche and lives in Malibu and probably a mansion and stuff. And what he used to do, I don't know if he still does it or not, was he just basically went after people like all of you for downloading music off websites, downloading movies, streaming YouTube videos that were copies of something, okay, that YouTube didn't catch. Okay. All the information is tracked back to you, and then he'd send a cease and desist letter and tell you that if you pay $2,000 or whatever it is to the law firm for his client, then it would go away and you wouldn't have to worry about it. Okay. And people will pay because they don't want to get sued. Okay? So just think about that the next time you think you want to steal that 99-cent song from your friend, or rip it off their CD or whatever. Yes. Incognito is not going to protect you. Yeah. That's a common mistake, that you think that incognito is invisible. No, it's not. Yeah. Even with like a VPN, it's probably not as secure as you think it is, because they can go get that information. If they can see that it's a VPN, they can go to the VPN provider, and they get served with a lawsuit threatening them with millions of dollars, they're likely to probably turn over the information. Okay. Yes. I honestly don't know how often. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, because he did it while he was in law school, so he was actually working for a law firm as an intern doing it. Yeah, yeah. Well, it does reduce privacy, like people seeing things, but it's still possible. I just read something recently. It's still possible with incognito to know what people are doing. Yeah. So yeah. So yeah. Was there another question? No? Okay. Copyright violations. Okay. So if someone violates your copyright, that's another risk. Okay. Stealing content that you created. Okay. So this is why, and I can bring it to the academic realm. Okay. Plagiarism. Okay. You steal something from someone. Okay. I don't care if it's you quoted it, you misquoted it, you paraphrased it. Okay. You still borrowed it from someone else. You have to give them attribution. Okay. Now in education, there are some fair use principles, but they don't always apply. So the reason why I can't share the real slides from the publisher with you is, okay, because they want them to be very heavily restricted, where you can't download them. You can only view them within Cougar courses. And that's a lot of effort to go figure out how to set that up. And I don't even think it's supported. Okay? So I can't, I can't provide those slides to you. So because I don't want to get triggered for a violation. Okay. Likewise, if you're doing a paper or something, the most common thing I see with papers is people will take something, rephrase it, put it in the paper, but they didn't have that knowledge. They got it from somewhere else. That's plagiarism. That's an academic integrity violation. It's also a copyright violation. So if you then go publish that paper somewhere or make profit off from it, they can come back for that against you. Okay. So as a business, this is very important. Okay. I know I brought some real examples from the consumer space of you individually, but from a business perspective, these are all very risky. Okay. You as an organization do not want to pirate software. Okay. And this includes using software that you didn't license. So some software doesn't require a code. Okay. You can download it, but if you're an enterprise, you have to have a license for it. And I worked for a company where Microsoft came back to us and did an audit. That was the most miserable experience of my life, was proving that we weren't using their software anymore, because we weren't. We'd moved to Google. So we'd gotten rid of all of our Exchange, but they didn't believe us. So they actually went and audited our systems, had us run software, run reports to show that we weren't using their software anymore. Okay. In the end, they eventually dropped it and realized we weren't using their software anymore. Okay. Now, same thing with Oracle. Oracle did the same thing. Okay. And these companies have deeper pockets than a lot of businesses do. Okay, so they can easily put you out of business. So it's very important. But from your policy perspective, getting back to this course, you want to make sure you account for these types of things in your policies. Okay, so you don't want your employees downloading software. Okay, One of the best ways to do that is basically to say that all software must be approved by the IT department or the legal department, okay? Or have appropriate policies in place for what's allowed and what you can't use. And that might be that if it's certain types of licensing, it's okay to download for certain purposes. So the rule that some companies have used is like, if it's an open source license, you can use it for your own workstation, but you can't produce any products that you sell with it. So you can use it for your own day-to-day work, but you can't use it to develop other software that you would then sell to someone else, okay? So those are the things you have to capture in a policy. You should also have a policy for how you respond to these types of risks, okay? So if you get a takedown notice from Google because someone took video and put it on your website or something, and you get a takedown notice from YouTube about it, how do you react to that? If you're a company that provides services to customers, how do you react to those types of things, okay? All right, so then we have information security, service interruptions, and risks. So this is a very long section of the material, okay? So if you've taken one of my classes before, we did a risk matrix. Don't worry, we're going to talk about it later in the course, okay, how to do a risk assessment. But if you did take it, you'll recall we had different types of risk, okay? So some of the examples are software risk, environmental risk, personnel risk, communications and power, extortion, accidents, hardware, and theft, okay? These slides, by the way, are posted on the website, okay? They're already out there. So you can take notes to supplement, but the slides are always out there. Usually the weekend before, by the end of the weekend. First thing is software, okay? So malware, this is a big one for organizations, okay? How are you going to protect against malware? And there are big companies who have been a victim of extortion as well related to malware. Where does that happen to anybody in the room here where your files get locked out and encrypted? No, nobody wants to admit to it. My grandmother had it happen to her because Microsoft called from San Diego and she knew I lived near San Diego. And I worked for some tech company, so she thought it was me. I was overseas. She tried desperately for 3 days to get a hold of me, couldn't. And finally I landed at JFK and my phone's like got 30 voicemails from her. And they got access to everything because of that, her bank accounts and everything. Fortunately, they saw it as fraud and stopped it. But other people aren't as lucky. Denial service and distributed denial service. If you are going to do those technical labs, you need to read Amazon's policy. Okay? If you violate the policy, that's on you. Okay? And Amazon's got big pockets. Okay? So you don't want to violate their policy on attacks on their infrastructure. Okay? Email, so spam, social engineering, and phishing. This happens here a lot. Okay? I can't tell you how many times I've gotten an email that says it's from Jim Hammerly. Okay, it's not. Or it's from someone in the office asking for my cell phone number or stuff. Okay, they've added some banners, but it's not 100% foolproof. Okay? Even some of you have sent messages and it thinks it's from the outside because you used your personal account. Okay. So you want to be aware of that and build policies around that and training. So when you're thinking about training, you should be thinking about all of these areas as well. How do you develop appropriate training? So that users don't click on phishing messages. One way is to actually do fake phishing attacks that instead of sending the message to the internet, like details, it sends it to your IT department. Another way is, have you seen the poster or the person who says, would you like help changing your password? Write your old password or new password here in your name. And then he writes on it, annotates after like 6 people write their name on it. He writes, come see me in the IT office, okay, right away, because they've given out that information. Okay, that's another way of doing a social engineering attack on people. Okay, have you done that before? Okay. Interception. So when we do traffic that's unencrypted, we can sniff that traffic. We can do man-in-the-middle attacks if we've got vulnerabilities in our code. So that's another area to think about. One policy that would be very important, especially with GDPR and CCPA these days, is secure coding practices. Okay, security by design. So you need to have a policy of security by design. We don't, when we build products, assuming we're a retail store, so I guess we have a website. I guess that would be the limit of software. But we build it with security by design. Okay? We don't think about security on the last day before we go push the production button. Okay, we think about it before we ever write a bit of code. And then bugs. So we can have intentional bugs and unintentional bugs. Okay, So both of those can happen. This website is where you can go to see the current top 10 risks rather than me reproduce them and then be out of date. The best bet's to go out there to that website, okay? And these are the ones I was talking about year after year after year. You'll see the same SQL injection errors and buffer overflow errors and things like that, okay? Anybody in here wanting to go into the software development side of IS? Nobody? Okay, I've been doing my job right. Just kidding. Weak software security, networking and cryptography. So we can have poor networking. Maybe we don't have SSL certs. By the way, my course website doesn't have an SSL cert. There's no need for it as far as I'm concerned. I'm not asking for any personal information. There's no cookies, and you're just going there to get course information. Okay, so I don't have an SSL cert. It would cost me money, or I have to sit there every 30 days and remember to change out the certificate. I have no time for the latter and no money for the former. Okay, they're very expensive. So it's not going to show a padlock when you go to it. You might get a browser warning about it. Okay, I'm telling you this because it's a security course. Generally speaking, I would want to secure it with an SSL certificate. But since I'm not collecting any data, there's no forms, there's no cookies. I disabled all the cookies on it, okay? I'm using a basic template that's ADA compliant, okay? So there's no need for any of that. But generally speaking, you want to make sure that your traffic is secured with encryption as well as your data is encrypted, okay? The actual data that's, I don't know why I did this, but I set it up in AWS to be an encrypted database. I don't know what I was thinking. I guess I thought I might use it for other purposes, okay? But for this class, it's pointless. Environmental. Natural disasters can happen pretty much anywhere in the world. There are some very light disaster zones like Nevada. There are data centers there that are very light disaster, very low risk. Civil unrest and war. These are very difficult to mitigate, but we want to have contingency planning in our security policies and procedures. Okay, we want to have contingency planning for what happens if we have a failure due to a natural disaster. Okay. We also want to cover that mostly with insurance. Insurance is where we really deal with those natural disasters, okay? So as a business, we should have insurance in place. Another thing is personnel. So we don't have to just worry about the hackers from the outside, okay? We also have to worry about people who are malicious internally. Internal espionage. I've seen that happen, by the way, in companies that I've worked for, okay? And the company should have seen the writing on the wall when they hired someone, had an NDA, told them not to bring anything, and then he brought it anyways from his previous employer, okay? They should have seen the writing on the wall that he was going to turn around and do the same thing to the company, but they didn't. So we locked him out of his machine. He went to Best Buy. The Geek Squad went and unlocked his machine for him, okay? And now he had access to everything because we didn't have an encryption key on it at the time, okay? So that brings me to, it's related to encryption is if you want to protect your data, okay, I see some Macs in the room, okay? If you have a Mac and I have physical access to it, I can get in without your password and I can access all of your data, okay? Unless you have File Vault turned on, okay? It's an easy fix to turn on File Vault. If you have File Vault turned on, yes, I can go in and I can change your password, but it invalidates all the data, okay? Unless I know your key for the data, okay? All I need is physical access. I know this very well because my daughter's laptop, she's forgotten her password so many times. I just logged into it, no problems at all, okay? Don't worry about trying to do it to mine. I have encryption on, okay? So you can't get into mine. So I won't put it past people to try, okay? Someone still trying to hack into my house network from remotely. From when I remember I did it in the database class. I opened it up. Someone is still trying to get in there and causing denial of service attacks at my house. I can't do anything about it. So you've got to worry about internal espionage and hackers. And by the way, if you need to leave early, I don't remember if people in this class have to catch the sprinter or not. Okay, so you're good, yeah. 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 Oh, yeah, sign up for your group if you didn't. Oh, he is group 2, yeah. Oh, actually, that means there's one less here because we can only have 7 per group. So, yeah, see, we don't need those 7s after all. He's bad at math. All right, there we go. Communications and power, okay? Power outages can be an issue. We need to plan accordingly. Because if we can successfully knock out power or communication, that can be a problem for our security. Okay. We still have 30 minutes. That clock's wrong. I was getting worried that I was over by a lot. Extortion, ransomware. Okay. Ransomware. So I encrypt your data, and the only way you're going to get it back is if you send me 200 Bitcoin. Okay. You better be very careful. So, and this is not going to protect you with a backup either, because if you don't have older backups than that, they can get into your, if they've gotten to your machine and they've encrypted it and then you back it up, it's a backup of the encrypted data, so you can't get into it anyways. Okay. So this is where you have to think about, as a business, how do you protect that data over time? Okay. Accidents. Okay. This happens. I'll give you an example from my own career of me. Okay. It wasn't that I was not following instructions. Okay? It was inexperience. I did not know that you could have 200 volt power or 220 volt power that looked like a 120 volt plug. I'd only ever seen the round ones that twist in for high voltage. So I was at the FAA and we got this brand new rack of servers with a bunch of these plugs in it. It looked just like this. It was 200 volt power though. I didn't know that. So I plugged in an old server, and it happened to be a very critical server. It was a DNS server. And it was set, it didn't have a switch to switch between, it didn't auto switch or anything. I plugged it in and it was 120 volt power supply. It popped. Sparks flew. Okay. That was bad. Another time was not me, it was a client site. Okay. Client had a major failure of their network because Gateway, which used to be a computer company, they don't exist anymore, but Gateway sent out a technician, and I love to tell the story because it's really funny. Okay. He comes out, and his job was to replace one of the bad hard drives. Well, first mistake he made was he pulled the wrong hard drive. So he pulled the working one out, not the broken one. Okay, so we lost all our data. But what was worse and scary was when he told me what caused him to do that. It was his first day on the job. He had not received any training, but he didn't say anything to me. I asked him, I said, so, well, you must have done this before. What did you do before you started the job this week? I was a mechanic and I worked on cars. Okay. That's bad. So training is very important. Okay. These things can happen. The other thing can be if people just don't follow instructions. So if you have a procedure and people don't follow it, it can lead to problems. So that gets me to something that you can do from a procedural basis of automating procedures. Anybody from the cloud class tell me what I'm talking about? Anybody remember that? We used, yeah, I heard it back there. Chef's an example. We use automation tools like configuration management to automate the policy. So things like Chef, Puppet, SaltStack, Terraform. Actually, I learned something new because I won't share that yet. Maybe at the end of class after I turn off the recording. Terraform has some policy-based stuff in it to do policy management for security and compliance in Terraform itself using some tools. Another cool thing that it has in it, and if you want to, you're welcome to go explore this on your own with Terraform. It has a vault capability called HashiCorp Vault, and that stores all the credentials for like your databases and stuff in a secure format, so you're not exposing that to the rest of your software repository and configuration repository. Next thing here is types. Okay, there can be other types of accidents. So social engineering, I could pick up the phone and I could call you and say, this is the IT help desk for CSU. There's a problem with your password. Can you give me your social security number? Okay, so we can unlock your account. Now, you're probably not going to fall for that, but people do fall for that all the time. Okay, phishing, sending an email, kind of along the same lines. Okay. Yeah, I think we all do. Yeah, these are people that are trying to do sophisticated social engineering. They know that most people aren't going to fall for it, but if they can even get 5, 10 people out of millions of calls they make with a robot who actually fall for it, they can make a lot of money. Okay? And unfortunately, elderly people are very prone to falling for that. Okay, people who are not tech savvy, that sort of thing. Okay? Hardware. So another aspect of problems can be hardware failures. Okay. Now, when we use cloud systems, we generally don't have to worry about this as much. Okay, but when we're not using cloud systems, this is something we actually really have to pay attention to. Okay. Mean time between failures, mean time to failure, and the mean time to diagnose. So when we're dealing with hardware, we purchase hardware, a lot of times it will have indication of MTBF, MTTF, and MTD, that sort of thing. Okay. Obsolete systems. So if we have obsolete systems, this can be a problem. Okay. This is where a lot of companies find themselves in trouble. So you need to have a policy to address obsolete systems. Okay. Regularly go through and assess your systems in your organization. Okay. Develop the procedures for doing those assessments, planning, and then doing periodic refreshes of your system so they don't become outdated, okay, and obsolete. Theft, this actually happens quite frequently. How many of you have left your laptop in your car? Just do it on a regular basis maybe, or your iPad or whatever. Okay. Bad idea. I might look like a foolish idiot walking into a bar with my laptop, okay, but at least I know that it's on my person and I'm not going to let it out of my sight, okay. It's a bigger problem if I stick it in my trunk. And I've seen people's cars get broken into. I had a boss lose a laptop, and he felt like a fool having to go to the security people and explain why he, as a director, lost the laptop. Okay? And this is also why sometimes we end up with free credit monitoring and stuff like that, is because people were careless and lost the device. Okay? That's the physical aspect of the hardware and software and the data, but there's also the electronic aspect. Okay? Someone can break into your system and steal your data. And I'll give you an example. A company I worked for had a system for ticketing, and some idiotic developer posted an update in the ticket with all the passwords and usernames for their production financials. Okay? And someone in IT misconfigured the ticketing system so it was publicly available. Well, Google picked it up in a search. So we were searching for something completely unrelated, okay? And my team found this vulnerability. Okay? We have no idea if anybody ever stole that information. We, of course, reported it. I mean, the VP was really pissed at me, okay, because I reported it, and he was busy at lunch with some client or something. But we had to go change the passwords in all the systems and disable all that stuff. Okay? Big fire drill. Okay? So that's something else to think about. From an information systems management perspective, it's coordination of resources, it's administration of people and policies and things like that, making decision making, and then resource allocation. Okay, and I have to say, most of the time you don't have enough people to do what you need to do. Okay, so in this class we're going to be very fortunate to have 40 people. Okay, probably the biggest team that I've had for this sort of thing. Managers versus leaders. Leaders influence and lead by example. Managers administer resources. You can have a leader that's a manager or a leader that's not a manager, okay? And vice versa, you can have a manager who's not a leader. Okay? And I've had plenty of those in my career. Some of you have heard horror stories, okay? All right. So from a security management perspective, we do planning, we create policy that leads to programs, we offer protection, we have people, and then we do project management. Okay? Now, from a planning perspective, we design our plan, we create it, and we implement it. And then when we implement it, we actually are implementing the procedures as well. Okay? So these are some of the areas that we're going to do as part of our policy and planning for the course, throughout the course, is incident responses. If there's an incident, how are you going to respond? Okay? So next week, one of the things I'm going to ask is who's interested in these areas. So think about them, do a little research, see what you're interested in. Okay? Someone or multiple people in the class are going to have to look at incident response. What kind of policy we're going to have, and what is the procedure to implement that policy. Okay? Business continuity, what happens if something bad happens, okay? How are we going to keep the business running? That's a big policy. It's very important. Okay? Disaster recovery, how are we going to do that? Okay? That's going to encompass things like how do we protect our data, backups, that sort of thing as well. What is our overall policy going to look like? How do we handle personnel? How are we going to roll out technology if we decide that we need to roll out technology? Okay? How are we going to handle risk management? And then lastly, the security program training and education aspect. Okay. So what are we going to need to do there? So be thinking about those areas for next time. The policy is just the guidelines that require a specific set of behaviors, and then we implement the policy with procedures. Okay. So for example, we're going to have an enterprise InfoSec policy. Okay. that we're going to do as a class. Then we're going to have within that policy, we're going to have issue-specific policies. Okay? And then we'll also have system-specific policies. Okay. You're going to do a setup program, okay, for the education. And we also need to think about not just information security. We do want to have a little bit about physical security. Okay. Protection, how are we going to assess risks? So you're going to do those risk assessments as groups. You're going to come up with protection mechanisms. You'll look at technologies and the tools. The people. So people are a critical link in the whole overall program. We're going to have security personnel. Then we're going to also have the security of personnel. Okay. So think about if you were the CEO of a company and you traveled overseas, okay, to an area that maybe wasn't safe. How are you going to manage the security of those personnel and the data they're carrying with them? Okay. And then the setup program as well. Who's going to manage that? The programs that we do in this course, although I'm doing it as a project for the course, a security program is an ongoing thing. It's not just a one-time project. Okay. Initially, when we roll it out, it is a project. Ongoing basis, those processes occur. Okay, on an ongoing basis. And that's it for the material for tonight. Okay. Any questions? If there are no questions, yes. The first weekly update. So yes, you do need to meet with your group between now and the next class. You're going to go over the materials for the risk assessment and decide who's going to do that and like what portions of the risk assessment, and just organize and decide when you're going to meet and that sort of thing. Yeah.